The hailstorm hit Chicago's South Side without warning. Jin Dae-hyun stood under the awning of his nightclub, watching ice the size of golf balls shatter against the pavement. The street emptied in seconds, everyone running for cover, abandoning their cars, their dignity, their composure. Everyone except the small figure stumbling through the chaos. She couldn't have been more than 7. Soaking wet, her dark curls plastered to her face, arms wrapped around herself as hail pelted her thin frame. She wore no jacket, no protection, just a faded pink t-shirt and jeans that hung loose on her small body. Dae-hyun moved before thinking. His men shouted warnings, Hyungnim, the storm, but he was already crossing the street, his expensive suit jacket forgotten. He reached her as she fell, scooping her into his arms just as a particularly vicious burst of hail struck where she'd been standing. She looked up at him with eyes too old for her face, eyes that had seen too much, survived too much. And then she spoke, her voice barely audible over the storm's rage. "My mother used to tell me about you." Dae-hyun's blood turned colder than the ice falling from the sky. Dae-hyun carried the girl into the club, water streaming from both of them onto the polished marble floor. His security team materialized instantly, Min-soo already grabbing towels, Ji-hoon on the phone calling for the club's doctor. "Get her warm," Dae-hyun commanded, his tone brooking no argument. "Now." He set her down gently on the leather sofa in his private office, the one space in the entire building that felt less like a crime lord's headquarters and more like a home. The girl shivered violently, her lips tinged blue, but those eyes, those impossibly knowing eyes, never left his face. "What's your name?" he asked, crouching before her, making himself less imposing. "Nyla," her teeth chattered. "Nyla Davis." Min-soo appeared with heated blankets, wrapping them around the child's small frame. Dae-hyun noticed the way she flinched at first, then melted into the warmth with a desperate gratitude that made his chest tight. "Nyla," he repeated, testing the name. It felt important, though he couldn't say why. "Where are your parents?" "My mama died." No tears. Just fact, delivered with the hollow acceptance of someone who'd already done their grieving. 3 weeks ago. Pneumonia. "And your father?" Her gaze locked onto his with unnerving intensity. "She never told me his name, just things about him." That sentence, "My mother used to tell me about you," echoed in Dae-hyun's mind. He'd heard it clearly despite the storm's roar. But how could this child's mother know him? He met hundreds of people, thousands. His world was vast, dangerous, filled with faces that blurred together. "What things?" His voice came out rougher than intended. Nyla pulled the blanket tighter. That he was strong, that he had a tattoo here. She touched her own neck, right where Dae-hyun's Korean symbol sat beneath his collar. That he owned a place where people danced. That he was scary to everyone else, but kind when no one was looking. Dae-hyun's heart hammered against his ribs. The description fit, but it could fit any number of men in his world. Chicago's Korean underworld was small, interconnected. Perhaps her mother had confused him with someone else. "Nyla," he said softly, slipping into Korean diminutive without thinking. "How did you know where to find me?" "I didn't." Her voice cracked. "I was just walking. After Mama died, they put me with a foster family, but they were mean. They locked me in the basement when I cried, so I ran away. I've been sleeping in alleys for 5 days. When the storm came, I just ran. And then you were there. 5 days." This child had survived Chicago's streets for 5 days. The doctor arrived, a discreet woman who'd patched up more bullet wounds than broken bones, but handled Nyla with surprising gentleness. Dae-hyun stood back, arms crossed, watching as she checked the girl for injuries, hypothermia, signs of abuse. "She's malnourished," the doctor reported quietly, "dehydrated, bruising on her arms consistent with being grabbed roughly, but nothing life-threatening if we get food and fluids in her now." "Do it," Dae-hyun ordered. As the doctor worked, Dae-hyun pulled out his phone, typing a message to his most trusted investigator. "Find everything about a woman named Davis. Deceased 3 weeks ago. Had a daughter named Nyla. Connection to dancers or clubs. Urgent." His mind raced through possibilities. He'd owned the Lotus Club for 8 years. Before that, he'd been building his empire through other means, less legal, more violent. Women came and went through his establishments. Dancers, waitresses, bartenders. Some he remembered. Most he didn't. But if this child's mother had known him well enough to describe his tattoo, his personality... "Mr. Jin?" Neela's small voice cut through his thoughts. He turned. She'd been given warm soup, orange juice, a protein bar. Color was returning to her cheeks, but exhaustion pulled at her features. "Just Dae-hyun," he corrected gently. "Dae-hyun," she tested the name. "Are you going to send me back? To the foster people?" The question gutted him. Not because of what she asked, but because of the resignation in her voice. She expected rejection, expected to be discarded. Something fierce and protective surged through his chest. "No." The word came out like a vow. "You'll stay here tonight. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." "Why?" Nyla's eyes searched his face. "Why would you help me? Mama said you were important, dangerous. That important, dangerous men don't help people like us." Dae-hyun crouched before her again, meeting her gaze directly. In his world, respect was everything. Truth mattered even to children, especially to children who'd already learned that adults lied. "Your mother was wrong," he said. "About one thing at least. Every man, no matter how dangerous, was once someone's son, someone's responsibility. And no child survives alone on Chicago streets on my watch." Nyla studied him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. "Mama said you had honor. She said that's what made you different." The word struck like physical blows. Honor. Such an old-fashioned concept in his world of blood and money and power, but it was the foundation his own father had beaten into him, sometimes literally, before Dae-hyun had left Seoul at 19 to build something in America. "What else did your mother tell you about me?" he asked, needing to know, dreading the answer. But Neela's eyes were already closing, exhaustion finally claiming her. Within moments she was asleep, curled into the blankets like a cat seeking warmth. Dae-hyun stood, studying her face. Something about the curve of her jaw, the shape of her eyes when they were open, tugged at his memory. But the connection remained elusive, dancing just beyond his grasp. His phone buzzed. The investigator, working fast. Found preliminary. Mariah Davis, 29, died County General 3 weeks ago. Former dancer at multiple establishments. Will have full report by morning. Mariah Davis. The name meant nothing. But then, 8 years was a long time. People changed. Memories faded. Nights in his clubs blurred together into an endless parade of music, lights, and faces. Still, Dae-hyun couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something crucial. Something that explained why this child looked at him with recognition, why her mother had spoken of him, why fate had placed her directly in his path during a storm that had cleared the streets of everyone else. He texted his head of security. "Post guards outside this door. No one enters without my permission. The child is under my protection." Then he settled into the chair across from the sofa, watching Nyla sleep, and waited for morning to bring answers to questions he hadn't known he needed to ask. Dawn broke over Chicago with the peculiar clarity that follows violent storms. Dae-hyun hadn't slept. He'd spent the night researching, making calls, and watching Nyla's chest rise and fall with the steady rhythm of someone finally feeling safe. She woke slowly, confusion flickering across her face before memory returned. Her eyes found him immediately. "You're still here," she whispered. "I said you could stay. I don't break my word." Nyla sat up, the blankets pooling around her waist. In the morning light, Dae-hyun noticed details he'd missed during the storm. The way her hair, now dry, formed tight curls that caught the sun. The way her skin, a rich deep brown, bore the same undertones as... His phone buzzed. The investigator. "Talk to me," Dae-hyun answered, stepping into the hallway while keeping the office door cracked. "Mariah Davis worked at the Lotus Club 6 years ago. 4 months, then she quit. No drama, just left. Before that, she worked at 3 other clubs in the city." Papers rustled. "I'm sending you her employment photo now." Dae-hyun's phone pinged. He opened the image and felt the ground shift beneath his feet. Dark curls, warm brown eyes, a smile that could light up a room. She was beautiful, striking in a way that made men stupid and careless, and he remembered her. Mariah. The memory crashed back with visceral force. 8 years ago, not 6. Before he'd bought the Lotus Club, he'd been at a rival's establishment, negotiating territory. She'd been dancing that night, and afterward they'd talked at the bar. She'd been funny, sharp, unimpressed by his reputation. They'd spent 3 nights together, intense, heated, brief. Then he'd gotten pulled into a war with the Russian syndicate. When he'd finally had time to breathe, she was gone. He'd assumed she'd moved on, found someone less complicated. He'd never tried to find her. "Boss?" The investigator's voice cut through his spiraling thoughts. "There's more. Mariah listed Nyla's father as unknown on the birth certificate, but Nyla was born 9 months after Mariah stopped working at your club. What's the exact date?" Dae-hyun's voice sounded strange to his own ears. The investigator rattled off the date. Dae-hyun did the math. His hands started shaking. "I need a DNA test," he said quietly. "Discreet. Today. Already arranged. Send me samples and I'll have results within 48 hours. Dae-hyun ended the call and stood in the hallway, staring at nothing. A daughter. He might have a daughter. This small, fierce, surviving child could be his blood. The implications were staggering. If anyone in his world knew he had a child, she'd become a target. Leverage, a weakness to exploit. His enemies would circle like sharks scenting blood. He'd have to protect her, hide her, or claim her publicly and dare anyone to touch what was his. The possessive thought surprised him with its intensity. He barely knew Nyla, and yet the idea of her being hurt, used, threatened, it ignited something primal in his chest. Something he'd thought his years in the underworld had killed. He returned to the office. Nyla was standing by the window, looking out at the city with an expression too solemn for 7 years old. "Hungry?" he asked. She turned, nodded. "Come on, we'll get breakfast." He led her through the club, empty at this hour, just cleaning staff who knew better than to ask questions. In the private kitchen behind the main bar, he pulled out ingredients, his movements automatic. Cooking had been his therapy during the brutal early years, something clean and constructive, when everything else in his life involved destruction. "You cook?" Nyla perched on a stool, watching him crack eggs. "You sound surprised. Mama said powerful men don't do normal things." "Your mother was full of opinions about me," Dae-hyun observed, whisking eggs with perhaps more force than necessary. Did she ever say why she didn't tell me about you?" Nyla's face fell. "She said you had a dangerous life, that knowing about me would put me at risk. She said she loved you too much to make me a target." The eggs blurred. Dae-hyun blinked hard, focusing on the pan. "She loved you." Past tense. And Mariah was gone. Dead at 29 from something as mundane as pneumonia. He'd never get to ask her why, never get to rage at her for keeping this secret, never get to thank her for protecting their child. If Nyla was his, the test would confirm it. But looking at her now, the stubborn set of her jaw when she was trying not to cry, the way she observed everything with calculated wariness, the fierce independence that had kept her alive on the streets, Dae-hyun already knew the truth. This was his daughter. He served the eggs, added toast, poured orange juice. Nyla ate like someone who'd learned not to waste food, efficient and thorough. When she finished, she looked up at him with those impossibly old eyes. "What happens now?" Dae-hyun sat across from her. "Now we figure out the truth and then we decide what comes next. Together." The truth about what? He could lie. Should lie, probably, until the test confirmed it. But he'd just told her he didn't break his word. And children who'd survived what she'd survived deserved honesty. The truth about whether your mother was right. About whether I'm the man she told you about. Understanding dawned in Nyla's eyes, followed quickly by fear. "And if you are, then you're not alone anymore." "But you said you're dangerous. You said men in your world have enemies." "They do. So I'd be in danger. Just like Mama said." Dae-hyun leaned forward. "Nyla, listen to me. Yes, my world is dangerous. Yes, I have enemies. But I also have power, resources, and a reputation that makes people think twice before crossing me. If you're mine," the word felt right, settled into place like a key in a lock, "then you're under my protection. And I protect what's mine." "Like the Godfather?" Nyla asked, and despite everything, Dae-hyun almost smiled. "You've seen The Godfather?" Mama loved old movies. She said they taught important lessons. Nyla tilted her head. She said the best villains were the ones who had lines they wouldn't cross. "And what's my line?" "Children," Nyla said simply. "She said you'd burn the world before you'd let a child suffer." That's why she knew, even though she never told you, that if something happened to her I should try to find you. The words gutted him. Mariah had known. She'd planned for this possibility. She'd sent their daughter to him as a last resort. She was right, Dae-hyun said quietly. About the line I won't cross. About what I'd do to protect you. Even though you don't know me? Even though I don't know you yet, he corrected. But I will, if you'll let me. Nyla studied him for a long moment. Then slowly, she reached across the table and placed her small hand over his scarred knuckles. Mama said you had good hands, that they'd built things and broken things, but they'd never hurt someone who didn't deserve it. Dae-hyun looked at their joined hands, his large and marked by violence, hers small and marked by survival. Your mother knew me better than I thought, he admitted. She loved you, Nyla repeated. She told me right before she died. She said, baby, if things get bad, find the man with the symbol on his neck. Find Jin Dae-hyun. He'll keep you safe. And there it was. The confirmation. The truth. Mariah had loved him, had trusted him, had sent their daughter to him with her dying breath. Dae-hyun's phone buzzed, his security reporting that the DNA collection kit had arrived, but as he looked at Nyla, at the hope and fear warring in her eyes, he realized he didn't need a test to tell him what his heart already knew. This was his daughter, and he'd failed her for 7 years by not knowing she existed. He wouldn't fail her again. The DNA results came back 36 hours later. Dae-hyun was in a meeting with his lieutenants when his phone buzzed with the message. He read it twice, then excused himself without explanation. 99.9% probability of paternity. He stood in the hallway outside the conference room, staring at those words until they blurred. A daughter. He had a daughter. The scientific confirmation of what his gut had been screaming since he'd remembered Mariah's face. Inside the office he'd converted into a temporary bedroom, Nyla was reading, a book about astronomy that Min Soo had brought her. She'd been staying at the club for 2 days now, quiet and watchful, as if waiting for the other shoe to drop. Nyla ya. Dae-hyun entered, and she looked up. We need to talk. Fear flickered across her face, but she set down the book and straightened her spine. Okay. He sat on the edge of the bed, the test results heavy in his pocket. The results came back from the DNA test. Her breath caught. And? You were right. Your mother was right. He met her eyes directly. I'm your father. Silence stretched between them. Nyla's lower lip trembled. Then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Are you mad? That Mama didn't tell you? The question nearly broke him. This child, his child, was worried about his feelings when her entire world had been shattered. No, Tal. The Korean word for daughter emerged naturally. I'm not mad. I'm devastated that I missed 7 years of your life. I'm furious at myself for not trying harder to find your mother, but I'm not mad at either of you. Your mother did what she thought was right. She protected you, but now you're stuck with me. Stuck? Dae-hyun's voice sharpened. Nyla, look at me. She raised her eyes and he saw tears threatening to spill. I'm not stuck with you. You are my daughter, my blood. Do you understand what that means in my world? Family is everything. Everything. I would tear this city apart before I'd let anyone hurt you. But I don't know how to be someone's daughter, Nyla whispered. The foster people said I was difficult, that I didn't listen, that The foster people were idiots, Dae-hyun interrupted. And you're not difficult. You're a survivor. You're strong, He searched for the word, Yonggi Ita, brave. What does that mean? It means you have courage, the kind that keeps you alive when the world wants to break you. He paused. Just like your father. Nyla stared at him. Then, suddenly, she launched herself forward, wrapping thin arms around his neck. The movement shocked them both. She was crying now. Great, heaving sobs that she'd clearly been holding back for days, weeks, maybe months. Dae-hyun held her carefully, as if she might shatter. He'd held weapons, crushed bones, destroyed lives, but holding his crying daughter felt like the most important thing he'd ever done. I miss her, Nyla sobbed into his shoulder. I miss Mama so much. I know, Tal, I know. She tried so hard. She worked 3 jobs, but she got sick and couldn't afford the medicine, and I couldn't help. I couldn't save her. The guilt in her voice made Dae-hyun's chest tighten. 7 years old and already carrying the weight of impossible responsibility. It wasn't your job to save her, he said firmly. That's never a child's job. Your mother knew that. She loved you enough to make sure you'd be taken care of if something happened to her. But I ran away from the foster home. She would have wanted me to stay to be good. She would have wanted you to be safe, Dae-hyun corrected. And if that home was hurting you, then running was the right choice. Nyla pulled back, wiping her face. What happens now? Do I have to go back to foster care? Since we know now? Dae-hyun had spent the past 2 days consulting with lawyers, working angles, preparing for this exact conversation. The legal system was complicated, but he had resources, and more importantly, he had determination. No foster care, he said. You're staying with me. We'll make it legal. Adoption, guardianship, whatever it takes. But you're not going anywhere. Really? Hope flared in her eyes, desperate and fragile. Really, but Nyla, I need you to understand something. He kept his voice serious. My life is complicated. Dangerous, like your mother said. I have enemies, people who would use you to hurt me. So we need to be smart about this. Smart how? For now, you'll stay here, where my security can protect you. We'll get you enrolled in a private school. A good one, safe. You'll have bodyguards, but they'll be discreet. And you'll learn the rules of my world. What rules? Never talk about what you see or hear in this building. Never tell strangers who your father is. Trust my people, but no one else. And if I tell you to do something, run, hide, stay quiet. You do it immediately, no questions. Nyla absorbed this, her face solemn. Okay. I mean it, Nyla. Your safety depends on following these rules. I understand. Mama taught me about staying safe. She said bad people look for weak targets. So you have to be smart, not weak. Another piece of Mariah's wisdom, practical and hard-earned. Dae-hyun wondered what else she'd taught their daughter, what other survival skills she'd passed down before the end. Your mother was right, he agreed. You're not weak, but you're also 7 years old, so I need you to let me be the strong one for a while. Can you do that? Nyla considered this. Can I still be strong too? Just with you? The question revealed everything. Her fear of being reduced to helplessness again, her need to maintain the independence that had kept her alive. Yes, Dae-hyun said. We'll be strong together. Over the next week, Dae-hyun watched his world shift. His men adjusted to the presence of a child with surprising grace. Min-soo taught Nyla card games. Ji-hoon showed her how to throw a proper punch. The club's chef competed with Dae-hyun over who could make her smile with their cooking. But it was the quiet moments that undid him. Nyla reading by the window, legs tucked under her, lost in stories about space and stars. The way she unconsciously hummed while drawing, the same way Mariah used to hum while getting ready for shifts. The fierce concentration on her face when she asked questions about Korean culture, wanting to understand this part of herself she'd never known. She called him Dae-hyun still, not comfortable with Appa yet. He didn't push. Trust took time, and she'd already given him more than he deserved. One night Dae-hyun found Nyla crying quietly in bed, clutching a photo of Mariah that he'd recovered from the foster home. Tell me about her, he said, sitting beside her. Tell me everything. And Nyla did. She talked about her mother's laugh, her terrible singing voice, her obsession with old movies, about how Mariah had worked herself to exhaustion to give Nyla a good life, about the stories she'd told, fairy tales where the princess saved herself, histories of strong women who'd changed the world. She was my hero, Nyla finished, voice thick with tears. She was everything. She was mine too, Dae-hyun admitted. I only knew her for 3 days, but she was unforgettable, and she gave me the greatest gift. She gave me you. Nyla looked at him, tears streaking her face. Do you think she'd be happy? That I found you? I think she planned it, Dae-hyun said. I think she always knew that if something happened, you'd find your way to me, because you're her daughter, and my daughter, and we don't give up. Nyla nodded slowly. Then, in a small voice, Can I call you Appa? That's Korean for dad, right? Dae-hyun's throat closed. He managed a nod. Appa. Nyla tested the word. Appa. Tal, he responded, pulling her close. My daughter. They sat like that until she fell asleep, and Dae-hyun realized that everything he'd built, the empire, the power, the reputation, meant nothing compared to the weight of this small body trusting him enough to rest. He'd been a son, a soldier, a criminal, a king. Now finally he was a father, and he'd die before he failed at it. 3 weeks after the storm, trouble found them. Dae-hyun was reviewing accounts when Min-soo burst into his office, face grim. "We have a problem. Victor's asking questions about a girl you've been keeping at the club." Victor Volkov. Russian. Ambitious. A perpetual thorn in Dae-hyun's side, always probing for weakness. What kind of questions? The kind that means he knows she exists and wants to know why you care. Dae-hyun's blood ran cold. He'd been careful. Nyla rarely left the club, and when she did, it was with heavy security. But Chicago's underworld was built on information. Someone had talked, or someone had seen. Where is she now? Schoolwork with the tutor, 3rd floor, Ji-hoon's posted outside. Dae-hyun stood. Double the security, no one gets near her, and find out how Victor learned about her. But he already knew the answer would be bad. Victor didn't ask questions unless he planned to use the answers as weapons. The threat materialized 2 days later. Dae-hyun was walking Nyla to the car, a rare outing to buy her winter clothes, when a black SUV pulled up. Victor emerged, all-expensive suit and predatory smile. "Jin," he called in accented English, "is good to see you, and this must be the little one everyone whispers about." Dae-hyun stepped in front of Nyla, his body a shield. "Victor, I don't recall inviting you to my territory. Is public street, da?" Victor's eyes slid past Dae-hyun to Nyla. "Pretty child, very pretty. Whose is she? None of your concern, but is my concern, because you are distracted lately, missing meetings, declining opportunities, all because of little girl." Victor's smile sharpened. "This makes me curious. Makes others curious too." Nyla's hand clutched the back of Dae-hyun's jacket. He could feel her trembling. "Appa," she whispered. The word, spoken in fear, seeking protection, made Victor's eyes widen, then narrow with calculation. "Appa," Victor repeated. "So is true. The great Jin Dae-hyun has daughter. This is interesting development." Dae-hyun's hand moved to his concealed weapon. "Walk away, Victor. Now." "Or what? You shoot me in street? In front of child?" Victor laughed. "No, no. You are different man now. Father changes things, da. Makes us soft. Last warning." Victor held up his hands in mock surrender. "I go. But remember, Jin, children are precious, delicate, so easy to lose in this cruel world." The threat hung in the air like poison. Victor climbed back into his SUV and drove away, but the damage was done. He knew. And what Victor knew, the entire underworld would know within hours. Dae-hyun rushed Nyla back inside the club. She was pale, shaking. "Nyla ya, look at me." He crouched before her. "That man can't hurt you." "He was scary," she whispered. "Scarier than the foster people. Scarier than being hungry." "I know, but you're safe here, I promise." "Mama said promises are dangerous." Nyla's eyes were too old again. That terrible wisdom of children who'd learned adults lied. She said people promise things they can't control. Dae-hyun cupped her face gently. "Your mother was right about many things, but she was wrong about this. I control more of this city than anyone, and I promise you, I will keep you safe." But keeping that promise proved more complicated than anticipated. Over the next week, Victor escalated. Deliveries to the club were interfered with. Dae-hyun's men were followed, threatened. Small attacks designed to destabilize, to distract, to make Dae-hyun realize his daughter was a liability. The other bosses watched with interest. Some sent quiet messages of support. Others remained neutral, waiting to see if Dae-hyun would show weakness. "You need to send her away," Min-soo argued during an emergency meeting. "Boarding school, protected location, somewhere Victor can't reach." "No." Dae-hyun's voice was absolute. "She's been abandoned enough. She stays with me. Then Victor will keep pushing until he can grab her, use her against you." "Let him try." Dae-hyun's eyes were ice. "Let him reach for my daughter. I'll cut off his hands." But that night, alone in his office, doubt crept in. Nyla was sleeping in the next room, exhausted from another day of fear and hiding. Was he being selfish, keeping her close? Would she be safer somewhere else? He pulled out his phone, staring at Mariah's photo. "What would you do?" he asked the image. "How do I protect her from this?" No answer came, just the weight of choices with no good options. Neela appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. Appa? You're sad. I'm fine, Tital. Go back to bed. You're lying. She padded into the room, climbing into the chair beside his desk. Mama said lying to protect people is still lying. Dae-hyun sighed. You're too smart for 7. Am I going to have to leave? Nyla asked quietly. Because of the scary man? No, but he's trying to hurt you. Because of me, so maybe I should… Stop. Dae-hyun's voice was firm. You're not the problem, Nyla. Victor is the problem, and problems can be solved. How? By reminding everyone in this city exactly who I am, what I'm capable of, and what happens to people who threaten my family. Nyla studied him. Are you going to hurt him? The question was direct, unflinching. She wanted the truth, not comfortable lies. If he forces my hand, yes. Will that make us safe? It will send a message. That you are untouchable. That my daughter is sacred. Nyla thought about this. Mama didn't like violence. She said it just made more violence. Your mother was gentle, kind, the best parts of being human. Dae-hyun leaned forward. But I'm not gentle, Nyla, I can't be. Not in this world. But that means I can protect you in ways your mother couldn't. I can make sure what happened to her, the poverty, the sickness, the systems that failed her, never happened to you. At what cost? The question, so mature from such a young voice, stopped him cold. What do you mean? Mama used to say everything has a cost. That violence costs pieces of your soul. Is protecting me worth that cost? Dae-hyun stared at his daughter, this small, fierce soul who'd survived streets and storms and carried her mother's wisdom like armor. Yes, he said simply. You are worth everything. Every piece. Every cost. I'd burn this entire city if it meant you were safe. Nyla climbed down from the chair and walked to him. She wrapped her arms around his neck and he felt her tears on his collar. I don't want you to burn, she whispered. I don't want to lose you too. Something cracked in Dae-hyun's chest. She wasn't just worried about her safety. She was worried about him, about losing the father she'd just found. You won't lose me, he promised. I'm too stubborn, too mean, too determined to watch you grow up. Promise? Real promise? Real promise. You're stuck with me, Tal. Nyla pulled back, wiping her face. Then do what you need to do to keep us safe, but come back. Always. The next day, Dae-hyun called a meeting. Every major player in Chicago's Korean underworld attended. He stood before them, Nyla at his side. A deliberate choice that made several men uncomfortable. This is my daughter, he announced in Korean, then repeated in English. Nyla, anyone who touches her, threatens her, or looks at her wrong will answer to me. Not my men. Not my organization. Me personally. Silence fell. Then, one by one, the other bosses nodded. Respect acknowledged. Line drawn. Victor wasn't at the meeting, but his lieutenant was, and the man's face had gone pale. Tell your boss, Dae-hyun said softly, that he has 24 hours to back off. After that, there will be consequences. The lieutenant fled. Neela squeezed Dae-hyun's hand. Was that the message? That was the first part. The second part comes if Victor's stupid enough to ignore it. He wasn't. Victor made noise for another few days, then went quiet. Word filtered back through the network. The Russian had decided Chicago had enough problems without starting a war with a man who'd publicly claimed his daughter. The other bosses had made it clear. Threatening Dae-hyun's child was bad for business. It destabilized the delicate balance of power, and no one wanted that. Is it over? Nyla asked a week later when the immediate threat had passed. For now, Dae-hyun admitted. There will always be other victors, other threats, but they know now. You're untouchable. Nyla nodded slowly. Then, thank you for not sending me away. I'll never send you away, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. 6 months after the hailstorm, Dae-hyun stood in Nyla's new bedroom, watching her arrange books on shelves. They'd moved from the club to a house, heavily secured but still a home, a place where she could have a yard, a dog, a life beyond reinforced doors and armed guards. She'd grown in those months, not just physically, though she'd filled out with proper food and care, but emotionally. The haunted look had faded from her eyes, replaced by something brighter. Hope, maybe. Trust. Appa? Nyla called from across the room. Can we put Mama's picture here? By the window? Wherever you want, Tal. She placed the frame carefully, adjusting it until satisfied. I talk to her sometimes, tell her about you, about us. What do you tell her? That she was right. That you're scary to other people but kind to me. That you make terrible jokes. Nyla grinned. That you burn eggs when you're distracted. I do not burn eggs. You burned them yesterday. That was an experiment. Nyla laughed, and the sound filled the house with light. Dae-hyun had learned to live for that laugh, to structure his entire day around moments that might produce it. She'd be happy, Neela said quietly, that I found you, that we found each other. I think she knew we would. Dae-hyun joined her by the window. I think she planned it all along. Your mother was smart like that. I wish you'd had more time with her. 3 days isn't enough. No, Dae-hyun agreed. But those 3 days gave me you, so I can't regret them. Nyla leaned against him, and he wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Outside, Chicago sprawled in all its complicated glory, beautiful and broken, dangerous and full of possibility. Appa, can I ask you something? Always. Do you ever wish your life was different? That you didn't have to be scary and dangerous? That you could just be normal? Dae-hyun considered the question carefully. Before you, maybe. I chose this life because I was good at it, because it gave me power and respect. But normal wasn't an option for a kid who immigrated with nothing. This world, he gestured to encompass the house, the security, the life they'd built, was the only path I could see. And now I have you. And that changes everything. I'd walk away from all of it, the clubs, the power, everything, if it meant keeping you safe. But you can't really walk away, can you? Too smart. She was always too smart. No, he admitted. Men like me don't retire. We just manage, balance, find ways to build something good alongside the darkness. Then I want to help, Nyla declared. When I'm older, I want to help you build the good parts. Nyla, I mean it. You have power, Appa. Real power. We could use it for more than just business. We could help people like Mama. Single mothers, kids on the streets. We could make sure no one else has to die because they can't afford medicine. Dae-hyun stared at his daughter, this small force of nature who'd inherited her mother's compassion and his determination. You're 7, he managed, almost 8, and Mama always said thinking big was free. Nyla's eyes shone with passion. We have money, resources. We could start a foundation for healthcare, for housing. Anonymous so it doesn't mess up your business, but real, actually helping. When did you plan all this? I've been thinking about it for weeks. Min-soo taught me about money management. Ji-hoon told me about community programs, and you, she poked his chest. You taught me that power means nothing if you don't use it for something that matters. I taught you that? You didn't say it, but you showed it. Every time you make sure your workers are paid fairly. Every time you help someone in the neighborhood. You think I don't notice, but I do. Dae-hyun felt his throat tighten. He'd spent years building a reputation as ruthless, cold, unstoppable, but his daughter saw through the armor to the man underneath, the man who'd never forgotten being hungry, being powerless, being nothing. Your mother would be proud of you, he said quietly. And you? Are you proud? Tal, I'm proud of you every single day. Neela beamed. Then her expression turned serious. So can we do it? The foundation? We'll do it. But he held up a hand as she started celebrating. Not until you're older. And we do it smart, safe. No drawing attention to you. Deal. She stuck out her hand, and they shook on it. That night, after Nyla was asleep, Dae-hyun sat in his office, staring at plans for the foundation she'd described. A way to honor Mariah, a way to give Nyla purpose, a way to balance the scales of all the darkness in his life. Min-soo knocked and entered. Boss? The lawyers finished the adoption papers. It's official. Legally, permanently, she's yours. Dae-hyun took the documents, reading through the formal language that made what his heart already knew into law. Neela was his daughter, his heir, his responsibility, his joy. There's something else, Min-soo continued. Victor's back in Russia. Apparently his own people forced him out. Word is, threatening your daughter made him too unstable. Bad for business. Good. The other bosses want a meeting. They're proposing a pact. Families are off limits. No more using children as leverage. Dae-hyun looked up sharply. Because of Nyla? Because of what you did to protect her. You drew a line and you made it stick. Now everyone else wants that same protection for their families. Something shifted in Dae-hyun's chest. Nyla had changed him, but through him, she'd changed the rules of their entire world, made it marginally less brutal, slightly more human. Tell them I agree, but I want it in writing. Enforceable, anyone breaks it answers to all of us. Boss, Min-soo hesitated. She's good for you, the girl. She makes you better. After Min-soo left, Dae-hyun walked to Nyla's room. She was sprawled across the bed, one arm hanging off the edge, completely at peace. So different from the terrified, soaking child he'd found in a hailstorm 6 months ago. He straightened her blanket, tucked her in properly. She stirred slightly, mumbling in her sleep. Love you, Appa. The words hit him like a physical blow. She'd never said it awake yet, still too cautious, too afraid of vulnerability. But asleep, unguarded, the truth emerged. Sarange Tal, he whispered back. I love you too. He'd told her once that he'd burn the city for her, and he'd meant it. But now, looking at her peaceful face, he realized the truth was bigger than that. He wouldn't just destroy for her. He'd build for her. Create something worthy of the faith Mariah had placed in him, something worthy of the girl who'd looked at a monster and seen a father. Nyla had found him in the storm, but she'd done more than survive the tempest. She'd brought him home. 5 years later, Dae-hyun stood backstage at the gala for the Mariah Davis Foundation. Through the curtain, he could see Chicago's elite mingling with community leaders, politicians, and families who'd been helped by their programs, healthcare initiatives, housing assistance, scholarship funds, everything Nyla had envisioned at 7, now real at 13. Appa? Nyla appeared beside him wearing a formal dress, but still managing to look like herself, confident, fierce, uncompromising. They're ready for us. Nervous? Terrified. You? Absolutely. They shared a grin, the private smile of two people who'd faced worse than public speaking, and survived. On stage, Nyla spoke about her mother with eloquence and passion, about growing up without resources, about the man who'd given her a second chance, about using power and privilege to lift others up. The audience was captivated. Dae-hyun stood to the side, watching his daughter command the room with words instead of weapons, and felt something impossibly close to peace. Later, after the speeches and photos and obligations, they drove home together. Nyla was already planning expansions. More cities, more programs, bigger impact. You know everyone at the gala was wondering why the great Jin Dae-hyun's daughter is so obsessed with charity, she said, scrolling through feedback on her tablet. Let them wonder. Aren't you worried it makes you look soft? Dae-hyun glanced at his daughter. 13 now, brilliant and unstoppable, carrying her mother's heart and his steel spine. Tal, I rescued you from a hailstorm because I couldn't walk past a child in danger. I've never been as hard as people think. I've just been careful about who sees the truth. And now I don't care what they see, I have you, that's enough. Nyla reached over, squeezed his hand. Love you, Appa. Sarange Nyla. Always. The storm that brought them together had long since passed, but the life they'd built in its aftermath, that was just beginning.